A trade war is fought not with weapons, but with tariffs, taxes on imports meant to punish and pressure other nations. When Donald Trump returned to the White House, he reignited a global trade war, aiming to rebalance what he called unfair trade relationships hurting American workers. Trump argued that decades of free trade left the U.S. with massive deficits and lost jobs, so he imposed heavy tariffs to make foreign goods more expensive and boost American industry. This America First approach marked a sharp break from past U.S. policies favoring free trade and global integration. The legal foundation for these actions was solidified in May 2025, when a federal appeals court restored Trump's authority to impose sweeping tariffs. With a key hearing scheduled for July 31st, the world is watching to see if any legal limits will be placed on this powerful economic weapon. For Trump, trade is ultimate leverage. America's consumer power is used to dictate terms, turning trade into a high-stakes tool of geopolitics. This strategy has transformed global commerce into a battleground, where economic penalties are wielded to achieve broader strategic goals. Trump's trade war has swept across the globe, targeting both rivals and allies. China, the main target, saw tariffs soar to 145% before a fragile truce brought them down to 30%, but tensions remain high. Mexico and Canada, America's neighbors, face 30% and 35% tariffs, while Asian economies like Bangladesh, Cambodia, Vietnam, and the Philippines have been hit with rates up to 35%. Even Japan and South Korea haven't been spared, facing 20% and 15% tariffs. The European Union narrowly avoided harsher penalties, settling for a 15% tariff in a deal many see as unstable. Brazil, a major agricultural exporter, faces a staggering 50% tariff, deepening resentment among traditional U.S. partners. In exchange for lower tariffs, countries like Japan and Vietnam have been forced to drop all tariffs on U.S. goods, creating a lopsided trade dynamic. The administration is also threatening a 10% tariff on all BRICS-aligned nations, aiming to isolate those drawing closer to China and Russia. The result? A fractured global economy, with the U.S. using trade as a weapon to reshape alliances and punish rivals. By some measures, Trump's trade war has delivered quick wins, forcing countries to lower barriers and shift supply chains. But these victories come at a steep diplomatic cost, alienating America's closest allies and eroding decades of trust. Leaders like Macron, Starmer, and Carney have openly rebuked U.S. policy, signaling a break from Washington's orbit. The America First approach has left allies feeling betrayed, pushing them to diversify partnerships and question U.S. reliability. Short-term economic gains may be overshadowed by long-term strategic losses, as America's alliances weaken and its global influence wanes. Treating allies as adversaries risks dismantling the very order the U.S. built, making future cooperation on global challenges far more difficult. The world is left more fragmented, with America's soft power and goodwill rapidly eroding. India is now in the crosshairs, facing a sweeping 25% tariff on all its goods exported to the U.S. starting August 1, 2025. With $88 billion in annual exports to the U.S. and a $46 billion trade surplus, India stands to lose much more than it gains. The tariffs will make Indian products, from textiles to software, far pricier for American consumers, threatening jobs and profits across India. Washington's stance is clear. India's goods can be replaced, giving the U.S. leverage and leaving India with few options for retaliation. But this is about more than economics. The U.S. is using tariffs to pressure India on energy and defense, demanding it cut Russian oil imports and buy more American equipment. India faces a stark choice: protect its strategic autonomy or risk economic pain by bowing to U.S. demands. The trade surplus, once a sign of strength, has become a liability, fueling the U.S. narrative of being taken advantage of. Losing access to the U.S. market could derail India's growth, with ripple effects across its entire economy. The U.S.-India trade war is deeply entangled with geopolitics, especially over India's ties with Russia. The White House is using tariffs to punish India for buying Russian oil and military hardware, threatening even harsher penalties if India doesn't comply. India relies on Russia for about 35% of its crude oil, far more than the 5% it gets from the U.S., making American demands a direct threat to its energy security. The pressure extends to defense. The U.S. wants India to abandon Russian arms in favor of pricier American systems, but these often come with strings attached and little technology transfer. Russian deals, like the BrahMos missile joint venture, have helped India build its own defense industry. something US offers rarely match. Choosing American weapons could mean sacrificing India's strategic autonomy and self-reliance. For decades, India has balanced relationships with multiple powers, avoiding formal alliances to maintain independence. Now, US demands are forcing a binary choice, Washington or Moscow. Resisting this pressure is crucial for India's sovereignty, but defiance risks more tariffs and possible sanctions. India faces a high-stakes balancing act, weighing economic risks against its long-held policy of strategic independence. The outcome will shape India's foreign policy for years to come. The stakes: sovereignty versus economic survival. The economic pressure on India is matched by a wave of harsh rhetoric from top US officials, escalating the dispute beyond policy. President Trump has publicly dismissed India's economic rise, lumping it with Russia as a dead economy, a claim that's both inaccurate and deeply insulting. Other US politicians have gone further, threatening to kill the Indian economy if it doesn't fall in line with American demands. This language is unprecedented toward a democratic partner and signals a shift from partnership to confrontation. The goal: intimidate and coerce India into abandoning its independent policies. But this approach risks backfiring, fueling nationalist backlash and making concessions to the US politically toxic in India. The rhetoric reveals a lack of respect for India's sovereignty, casting it as a subordinate rather than an equal. The result: deep resentment and a damaged relationship that will outlast the current trade dispute. The reservoir of goodwill between the two democracies is rapidly draining. Beneath the trade war lies a deeper tension: Western discomfort with India's rise as a confident, independent power. For decades, the global order was set by a Western club. Now, India's assertiveness challenges that hierarchy. India's refusal to take sides on Ukraine, its ties with Russia, and its leadership in BRICS are seen as threats to the old order. The US is using economic leverage to remind India of its vulnerabilities, pushing back against its strategic autonomy. This is about more than trade. It's a struggle over the future shape of the world order. Will the world remain US-led or become multipolar with India as a key player? The pressure on India is a sign of Western anxiety about sharing power in a changing world. Trump's trade war is sending shockwaves through the global economy, disrupting supply chains and fueling fears of recession. Rising tariffs have driven up costs for companies and consumers, with inflation looming in the US and beyond. Major retailers and automakers warn that higher prices are inevitable, threatening growth and jobs. Economists predict a global slowdown as countries scramble to adapt and reduce dependence on the US-China, though hit hard, has shown resilience. But even its growth is expected to slow as the year progresses. The trade war is accelerating economic de-risking, fragmenting global trade, and pushing countries to seek new partners. Non-Western blocs like BRICS are strengthening as targeted nations look for alternatives to US-led systems. Traditional allies are drifting, and new alliances are forming, moving the world toward a more multipolar and contentious order. The aggressive trade-first policy is redrawing the map of global power. India stands at a crossroads, facing immense challenges and new opportunities in a fractured world. The US trade war threatens its export-driven growth, while pressure to abandon Russia tests its strategic autonomy. India must balance defiance with diplomacy, diversifying export markets and boosting domestic resilience. This crisis is also a chance for India to reaffirm its independence, resisting economic coercion and strengthening ties with other multipolar powers. Platforms like BRICS and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization will be key to building collective resistance. The choices India makes now will define its role as a global power. Economic resilience, diplomatic skill, and a commitment to sovereignty are essential. The outcome will determine not just trade policy, but India's place in the 21st century world.